Letter 22 of the Borough by George Crabbe. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Letter 22. The Poor of the Borough. Peter Grimes. Methought the souls of all that I had murdered came to my tent, and every one did threat. Shakespeare, Richard III. The time hath been that when the brains were out the man would die, and there an end. But now they rise again, with 20 mortal murders on their crowns, and push us from our stools. Shakespeare, Macbeth. The father of Peter a fisherman, Peter's early conduct, his grief for the old man, he takes an apprentice, the boy's suffering and fate, a second boy, how he died, Peter acquitted, a third apprentice, a voyage by sea, the boy does not return. Evil report on Peter, he is tried and threatened, lives alone, his melancholy and incipient madness, is observed and visited, he escapes and is taken, is lodged in a parish house, women attend and watch him, he speaks in a delirium, grows more collected, his account of his feelings and visionary terrors previous to his death. Old Peter Grimes made fishing his employ, his wife he cabined with him, and his boy, and seemed that life laborious to enjoy. To town came quiet Peter with his fish, and had of all a civil word and wish. He left his trade upon the Sabbath day, and took young Peter in his hand to pray. But soon the stubborn boy from care broke loose, at first refused, then added his abuse. His father's love he scorned, his power defied, but being drunk, wept sorely when he died. Yes, then he wept, and to his mind there came much of his conduct, and he felt the shame. How he had oft the good old man reviled, and never paid the duty of a child. How, when the father in his Bible read, he in contempt and anger left the shed. It is the word of life, the parent cried. This is the life itself, the boy replied. And while old Peter in amazement stood, gave the hot spirits to his boiling blood, how he, with oath and furious speech, began to prove his freedom and assert the man. And when the parent checked his impious rage, how he had cursed the tyranny of age, nay, once had dealt a sacrilegious blow on his bare head, and laid his parent low. The father groaned, "If thou art old," said he, "and hast a son, thou wilt remember me. Thy mother left me in a happy time, thou killedst not her, heaven spares the double crime." On an inn settle, in his maudlin grief, this he resolved, and drank for his relief. Now lived the youth in freedom, but debarred from constant pleasures, and he thought it hard. Hard that he could not every wish obey, but must a while relinquish ale and play. Hard that he could not to his cards attend, but must acquire the money he would spend. With greedy eye he looked on all he saw, he knew not justice, and he laughed at law. On all he marked he stretched his ready hand, he fished by water and he filched by land. Oft in the night has Peter dropped his oar, fled from his boat, and sought for prey on shore. Oft up the hedgerow glided, on his back bearing the orchard's produce in a sack, or farmyard load, tugged fiercely from the sack. And as these wrongs to greater numbers rose, the more he looked on all men as his foes. He built a mud-walled hovel, where he kept his various wealth, and there he oft-times slept. But no success could please his cruel soul, he wished for one to trouble and control. He wanted some obedient boy to stand and bear the blow of his outrageous hand, and hoped to find in some propitious hour a feeling creature subject to his power. Peter had heard there were in London then, still have they being, workhouse clearing men, who undisturbed by feelings just or kind, would parish boys to needy tradesmen bind, they in their want a trifling sum would take, and toiling slaves of piteous orphans make. Such Peter sought, and when a lad was found, the sum was dealt him, and the slave was bound. Some few in town observed in Peter's trap A boy with jacket blue and woollen cap, But none inquired how Peter used the rope, Or what the bruise that made the stripling stoop. None could the ridges on his back behold, None sought him shivering in the winter's cold. None put the question, Peter, dost thou give the boy his food? What, man! the lad must live. Consider, Peter, let the child have bread, He'll serve the better if he's stoked and fed. None reasoned thus, and some, on hearing cries, Said calmly, Grimes is at his exercise. Pinned, beaten, cold, pinched, threatened, and abused, His efforts punished and his food refused, Awake tormented, soon aroused from sleep, Struck if he wept, and yet compelled to weep, The trembling boy dropped down and strove to pray, Received a blow, and trembling turned away, Or sobbed and hid his piteous face, While he, the savage master, grinned in horrid glee. He'd now the power he ever loved to show, A feeling being, subject to his blow. Thus lived the lad, in hunger, peril, pain, His tears despised, his supplications vain. Compelled by fear to lie, by need to steal, His bed uneasy, and unblessed his meal. For 3 sad years the boy his tortures bore, And then his pains and trials were no more. How died he, Peter? When the people said, He growled, I found him lifeless in his bed. Then tried for softer tone, and sighed, Poor Sam is dead. Yet murmurs were there, and some questions asked, How he was fed, how punished, and how tasked. Much they suspected, but they little proved, And Peter passed untroubled and unmoved. Another boy with equal ease was found, The money granted and the victim bound. And what his fate? One night it chanced he fell From the boat's mast and perished in her well, Where fish were living kept, and where the boy, So reasoned men, could not himself destroy. Yes, so it was, said Peter, in his play, For he was idle both by night and day, He climbed the mainmast and then fell below, Then showed his corpse and pointed to the blow. What said the jury? They were long in doubt, But sturdy Peter faced the matter out. So they dismissed him, saying at the time, Keep fast your hatchway when you've boys who climb. This hit the conscience, and he coloured more Than for the closest question put before. Thus all his fears the verdict set aside, And at the slave shop Peter still applied. Then came a boy, of manners soft and mild, Our seamen's wives with grief beheld the child. All thought, the poor themselves, that he was one Of gentle blood, some noble sinner's son, Who had belike deceived some humble maid, Whom he had first seduced and then betrayed. However this, he seem'd a gracious lad, In grief submissive, and with patience sad. Passive he labour'd, till his slender frame Bent with his loads, and he at length was lame. Strange that a frame so weak could bear so long The grossest insult and the foulest wrong. But there were causes. In the town they gave Fire, wood, and comfort to the gentle slave; And though stern Peter, with a cruel hand, And knotted rope, enforced the rude command, Yet he consider'd what he'd lately felt, And his vile blows with selfish pity dealt. One day such draughts the cruel fisher made, He could not vend them in his Borough trade, But sail'd for London mart. The boy was ill, but ever humbled to his master's will; And on the river, where they smoothly sail'd, He strove with terror, and a while prevail'd; But new to danger on the angry sea, He clung affrightened to his master's knee. The boat grew leaky, and the wind was strong, Rough was the passage, and the time was long. His liquor fail'd, and Peter's wrath arose. No more is known, the rest we must suppose, Or learn of Peter. Peter says he spied the stripling's danger, and for harbour tried, meantime the fish, and then the apprentice died. The pitying women raised a clamour round, and weeping said, "Thou hast thy 'prentice drowned." Now the stern man was summoned to the hall, to tell his tale before the burghers all. He gave the account, professed the lad he loved, and kept his brazen features all unmoved. The mayor himself with tone severe replied, "Henceforth with thee shall never boy abide. Hire thee a freeman, whom thou durst not beat, but who in thy despite will sleep and eat. Free art thou now; again shouldst thou appear, Thou'lt find thy sentence, like thy soul, severe." Alas! for Peter not a helping hand, So was he hated, could he now command. Alone he rowed his boat, alone he cast His nets aside, or made his anchor fast. To hold a rope or hear a curse was none, He toiled and railed, he groaned and swore alone. Thus by himself compelled to live each day, To wait for certain hours the tide's delay. At the same time the same dull views to see, The bounding marsh bank and the blighted tree; The water only, when the tides were high, When lo! the mud half covered and half dry; The sunburnt tar that blisters on the planks, And bank side stakes in their uneven ranks; Heaps of entangled weeds that slowly float, As the tide rolls by the impeded boat. When tides were neap, and in the sultry day, Through the tall bounding mud banks made their way, Which on each side rose swelling, and below The dark warm flood ran silently and slow. There anchoring, Peter chose from man to hide, There hang his head, and view the lazy tide In its hot slimy channel slowly glide. Where the small eels that left the deeper way For the warm shore, within the shallows play; Where gaping mussels, left upon the mud, Slope their slow passage to the fallen flood. Here dull and hopeless he'd lie down and trace How sidelong crabs had scrawled their crooked race; Or sadly listen to the tuneless cry Of fishing gull, or clanging golden eye. What time the sea birds to the marsh would come, And the loud bittern, from the bulrush home, Gave from the salt ditch side the bellowing boom, He nursed the feelings these dull scenes produce, And loved to stop beside the opening sluice, Where the small stream, confined in narrow bound, Ran with a dull, unvaried, saddening sound; Where, all presented to the eye or ear, Oppressed the soul with misery, grief, and fear. Besides these objects, there were places three, Which Peter seem'd with certain dread to see. When he drew near them, he would turn from each, And loudly whistle till he passed the reach. A change of scene to him brought no relief; In town 'twas plain men took him for a thief. The sailors' wives would stop him in the street, And say, "Now, Peter, thou'st no boy to beat." Infants at play when they perceived him, ran, Warning each other, "That's the wicked man." He growled an oath, and in an angry tone Cursed the whole place, and wished to be alone. Alone he was, the same dull scenes in view, And still more gloomy in his sight they grew. Though man he hated, yet employed alone At bootless labour, he would swear and groan, Cursing the shoals that glided by the spot, And gulls that caught them when his arts could not. Cold nervous tremblings shook his sturdy frame, And strange disease, he couldn't say the name. Wild were his dreams, and oft he rose in fright, Waked by his view of horrors in the night; Horrors that would the sternest minds amaze, Horrors that demons might be proud to raise; And though he felt forsaken, grieved at heart, To think he lived from all mankind apart, Yet if a man approach'd, in terrors he would start. A winter passed since Peter saw the town, And summer lodgers were again come down. These, idly curious, with their glasses spied The ships in bay, as anchored for the tide, The river's craft, the bustle of the quay, and seaport views which landmen love to see. One, up the river, had a man and boat seen day by day, now anchored, now afloat. Fisher he seemed, yet used no net nor hook, of sea fowl swimming by, no heed he took, but on the gliding waves still fixed his lazy look. At certain stations he would view the stream, as if he stood bewildered in a dream, or that some power had chained him for a time to feel a curse or meditate on crime. This known, some curious, some in pity went, and others questioned, "Wretch, dost thou repent?" He heard, he trembled, and in fear resigned his boat. New terror filled his restless mind. Furious he grew, and up the country ran, and there they seized him, a distempered man. Him we received, and to a parish bed, followed and cursed, the groaning man was led. Here, when they saw him, whom they used to shun, a lost lone man, so harassed and undone, our gentle females, ever prompt to feel, perceived compassion on their anger steal. His crimes they could not from their memories blot, but they were grieved and trembled at his lot. A priest too came, to whom his words are told, and all the signs they shuddered to behold. "Look, look," they cried, "his limbs with horror shake, and as he grinds his teeth, what noise they make! How glare his angry eyes, and yet he's not awake! See what cold drops upon his forehead stand, and how he clenches that broad bony hand." The priest attending, found he spoke at times as one alluding to his fears and crimes. "It was the fall," he muttered, "I can show the manner how, I never struck a blow." And then aloud, "Unhand me, free my chain, on oath he fell, it struck him to the brain. Why ask my father? That old man will swear against my life. Besides, he wasn't there. What, all agreed? Am I to die to-day? My Lord, in mercy give me time to pray." Then, as they watched him, calmer he became, and grew so weak he couldn't move his frame; but murmuring spake, while they could see and hear the start of terror and the groan of fear. See the large dew beads on his forehead rise, and the cold death drop glaze his sunken eyes. Nor yet he died, but with unwonted force Seem'd with some fancied being to discourse. He knew not us, or with accustom'd art He hid the knowledge, yet exposed his heart. 'Twas part confession, and the rest defence, A madman's tale, with gleams of waking sense. "I'll tell you all," he said, "the very day When the old man first placed them in my way. My father's spirit, he who always tried To give me trouble, when he lived and died, When he was gone, he could not be content To see my days in painful labour spent, But would appoint his meetings, and he made Me watch at these, and so neglect my trade. 'Twas one hot noon, all silent, still, serene, No living being had I lately seen. I paddled up and down, and dipped my net, But, such his pleasure, I could nothing get. A father's pleasure, when his toil was done, To plague and torture thus an only son. And so I sat and looked upon the stream, How it ran on, and felt as in a dream. But dream it was not; no, I fixed my eyes On the mid stream, and saw the spirits rise. I saw my father on the water stand, And hold a thin pale boy in either hand; And there they glided ghastly on the top Of the salt flood, and never touched a drop. I would have struck them, but they knew the intent, And smiled upon the oar, and down they went. Now from that day, whenever I began To dip my net, there stood the hard old man, He and those boys. I humbled me and prayed they would be gone; They heeded not, but stayed. Nor could I turn, nor would the boat go by, But gazing on the spirits, there was I. They bade me leap to death, But I was loath to die, and every day, as sure as day arose, would these three spirits meet me ere the close. To hear and mark them daily was my doom, and come, they said, with weak sad voices, come. To row away, with all my strength I tried, but there were they, hard by me in the tide, the three unbodied forms, and come, still come, they cried. Fathers should pity, but this old man shook his hoary locks and froze me by a look. Thrice when I struck them, through the water came a hollow groan that weakened all my frame. Father, said I, have mercy. He replied, I know not what. The angry spirit lied. Didst thou not draw thy knife? Said he. 'Twas true, but I had pity, and my arm withdrew. He cried for mercy, which I kindly gave, but he has no compassion in his grave. There were three places where they ever rose, the whole long river has not such as those. Places accursed, where if a man remain, he'll see the things which strike him to the brain. And there they made me on my paddle lean, and look at them for hours, a cursed scene. When they would glide to that smooth eddy space, then bid me leap and join them in that place. And at my groans each little villain sprite enjoyed my pains and vanished in delight. In one fierce summer day, when my poor brain was burning hot and cruel was my pain, then came this father foe, and there he stood with his two boys again upon the flood. There was more mischief in their eyes, more glee in their pale faces when they glared at me. Still they did force me on the oar to rest, and when they saw me fainting and oppressed, he with his hand, the old man, scooped the flood, and there came flame about him mixed with blood. He bade me stoop and look upon the place, then flung the hot red liquor in my face. Burning it blazed, and then I roared for pain, I thought the demons would have turned my brain. Still there they stood, and forced me to behold a place of horrors, they cannot be told. Where the flood opened, there I heard the shriek of tortured guilt no earthly tongue can speak. All days alike, for ever, did they say, and unremitted torments every day. Yes, so they said. But here he ceased, and gazed on all around, affrighted and amazed, and still he tried to speak, and looked in dread of frightened females gathering round his bed, then dropped exhausted, and appeared at rest, till the strong foe the vital powers possessed. Then with an inward broken voice he cried, Again they come, and muttered as he died. Footnote 13. The character of Grimes, his obduracy and apparent want of feeling, his gloomy kind of misanthropy, the progress of his madness, and the horrors of his imagination, I must leave to the judgment and observation of my readers. The mind here exhibited is one untouched by pity, unstung by remorse, and uncorrected by shame. Yet is this hardihood of temper and spirit broken by want, disease, solitude, and disappointment, and he becomes the victim of a distempered and horror-stricken fancy. It is evident, therefore, that no feeble vision, no half-visible ghost, not the momentary glance of an unbodied being, nor the half-audible voice of an invisible one, would be created by the continual workings of distress on a mind so depraved and flinty. The ruffian of Mr. Scott, Marmion, has a mind of this nature. He has no shame or remorse, but the corrosion of hopeless want, the wasting of unabating disease, and the gloom of unvaried solitude will have their effect on every nature, and the harder that nature is, and the longer time required to work upon it, so much the more strong and indelible is the impression. This is all the reason I am able to give why a man of feeling so dull should yet become insane, and why the visions of his distempered brain should be of so horrible a nature. End of Letter 22. Letter 23 of the Borough by George Crabbe. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Letter 23, Prisons. Poenae autem vehemens ac multo saevior illis, quas et caeditiis gravis invenit aut Radamantes, nocte dieque suum gestare impectora testem. Juvenal, Satire 13. Think my former state a happy dream, from which awaked, the truth of what we are shows us but this: I am sworn brother now to grim necessity, and he and I will keep a league till death. Shakespeare, Richard II. Footnote 14. That a letter on prisons should follow the narratives of such characters as Kean and Grimes is unfortunate, but not to be easily avoided. I confess it is not pleasant to be detained so long by subjects so repulsive to the feelings of many as the sufferings of mankind, but though I assuredly would have altered this arrangement had I been able to have done it by substituting a better, yet am I not of opinion that my verses, or indeed the verses of any other person, can so represent the evils and distresses of life as to make any material impression on the mind, and much less any of injurious nature. Alas, sufferings, real, evident, continually before us, have not effects very serious or lasting, even in the minds of the more reflecting and compassionate; nor indeed does it seem right that the pain caused by sympathy should serve for more than a stimulus to benevolence. If then the strength and solidity of truth placed before our eyes have effect so feeble and transitory, I need not be very apprehensive that my representations of poorhouses and prisons, of wants and sufferings, however faithfully taken, will excite any feelings which can be seriously lamented. It has always been held as a salutary exercise of the mind to contemplate the evils and miseries of our nature. I am not, therefore, without hope that even this gloomy subject of imprisonment, and more especially the dream of the condemned highwayman, will excite in some minds that mingled pity and abhorrence, which, while it is not unpleasant to the feelings, is useful in its operation. It ties and binds us to all mankind by sensations common to us all, and in some degree connects us, without degradation, even to the most miserable and guilty of our fellow men. The mind of man accommodates itself to all situations. Prisons otherwise would be intolerable. Debtors, their different kinds, 3 particularly described, others more briefly: an arrested prisoner, his account of his feelings and his situation, the alleviations of a prison, prisoners for crimes, 2 condemned, a vindictive female, a highwayman, the interval between condemnation and execution, his feelings as the time approaches, his dream. 'Tis well that man to all the varying states of good and ill his mind accommodates. He not alone progressive grief sustains, but soon submits to unexperienced pains. Change after change, all climes, his body bears, his mind repeated shocks of changing cares. Faith and fair virtue arm the nobler breast, hope and mere want of feeling aid the rest. Or who could bear to lose the balmy air of summer's breath, from all things fresh and fair, with all that man admires or loves below, all earth and water, wood and vale bestow, where rosy pleasures smile, whence real blessings flow, with sight and sound of every kind that lives, and crowning all with joy that freedom gives? Who could from these, in some unhappy day, bear to be drawn by ruthless arms away, to the vile nuisance of a noisome room, where only insolence and misery come, save that the curious will by chance appear, or some in pity drop a fruitless tear? to a damp prison, where the very sight of the warm sun is favour and not right, where all we hear or see the feeling shock, the oath and groan, the fetter and the lock. Who could bear this and live? Oh, many a year all this is borne, and miseries more severe; and some there are, familiar with the scene, who live in mirth, though few become serene. Far as I might the inward man perceive, there was a constant effort not to grieve, not to despair, for better days would come, and the freed debtor smile again at home. Subdued his habits, he may peace regain, and bless the woes that were not sent in vain. Thus might we class the debtors here confined, the more deceived, the more deceitful kind. Here are the guilty race, who mean to live on credit that credulity will give; who purchase, conscious they can never pay; who know their fate, and traffic to betray; on whom no pity, fear, remorse prevail; their aim a statute, their resource a jail. These are the public spoilers we regard, no dun so harsh, no creditor so hard. A second kind are they, who truly strive to keep their sinking credit long alive. Success, nay prudence, they may want, but yet they would be solvent, and deplore a debt. All means they use, to all expedients run, and are by slow sad steps at last undone. Justly perhaps you blame their want of skill, but mourn their feelings and absolve their will. There is a debtor, who his trifling all spreads in a shop, it would not fill a stall; there at one window his temptation lays, and in new modes disposes and displays. Above the door you shall his name behold, and what he vends in ample letters told; the words repository, warehouse, all he uses to enlarge concerns so small. He to his goods assigns some beauty's name, then in her reign, and hopes they'll share her fame; and talks of credit, commerce, traffic, trade, as one important by their profit made. But who can paint the vacancy, the gloom, and spare dimensions of one backward room, wherein he dines, if so 'tis fit to speak, of one day's herring and the morrow's steak? An anchorite in diet, all his care is to display his stock and vend his ware. Long waiting hopeless, then he tries to meet a kindler fortune in a distant street. There he again displays, increasing yet corroding sorrow and consuming debt. Alas! he wants the requisites to rise, the true connections, the availing ties. They who proceed on certainties advance, these are not times when men prevail by chance. But still he tries, till, after years of pain, he finds, with anguish, he has tried in vain. Debtors are these, on whom 'tis hard to press, 'tis base, impolitic, and merciless. To these we add a miscellaneous kind, by pleasure, pride, and indolence confined; those whom no calls, no warnings could divert, the unexperienced and the inexpert. The builder, idler, schemer, gamester sought, the follies different, but the same their lot. Victims of horses, lasses, drinking, dice, of every passion, humour, whim, and vice. See that sad merchant who but yesterday had a vast household in command and pay, he now entreats permission to employ a boy he needs, and then entreats the boy. And there sits one improvident, but kind, bound for a friend whom honour could not bind. Sighing, he speaks to any who appear, "A treacherous friend, 'twas that which sent me here; I was too kind, I thought I could depend on his bare word; he was a treacherous friend." A female too, it is to her a home, she came before, and she again will come. Her friends have pity, when their anger drops, they take her home, she's tried her schools and shops, plan after plan, but fortune would not mend, she to herself was still the treacherous friend, and wheresoe'er began, all here was sure to end, and there she sits, as thoughtless and as gay as if she'd means, or not a debt to pay, or knew to-morrow she'd be called away, or felt a shilling and could dine to-day. While thus observing, I began to trace the sobered features of a well-known face, looks once familiar, manners formed to please, and all illumined by a heart at ease, but fraud and flattery ever claimed a part, still unresisted, of that easy heart. But he at length beholds me, "Ah, my friend, and have thy pleasures this unlucky end?" "Too sure," he said, and smiling as he sighed, "I went astray, though prudence seemed my guide. All she proposed, I in my heart approved, and she was honour'd, but my pleasure loved. Pleasure, the mistress to whose arms I fled, from wife-like lectures angry prudence read. Why speak the madness of a life like mine, the powers of beauty, novelty, and wine? Why paint the wanton smile, the venal vow, or friends whose worth I can appreciate now? Oft I perceived my fate, and then could say, I'll think to-morrow, I must live to-day. So am I here, I own the laws are just, and here, where thought is painful, think I must. But speech is pleasant, this discourse with thee brings to my mind the sweets of liberty, breaks on the sameness of the place, and gives the doubtful heart conviction that it lives. Let me describe my anguish in the hour when law detained me, and I felt its power. When in that shipwreck this I found my shore, and joined the wretched who were wrecked before. When I perceived each feature in the face, pinched through neglect or turbid by disgrace, when in these wasting forms affliction stood in my afflicted view, it chilled my blood. And forth I rushed, a quick retreat to make, till a loud laugh proclaimed the dire mistake. And when the groan had settled to a sigh, when gloom became familiar to the eye, when I perceive how others seem to rest, with every evil rankling in my breast, led by example I put on the man, sing off my sighs, and trifle as I can. Homer, nay Pope, for never will I seek applause for learning, naught have I with Greek, gives us the secrets of his pagan hell, where ghost with ghost in sad communion dwell, where shade meets shade, and round the gloomy meads they glide and speak of old heroic deeds, what fields they conquered, and what foes they slew, and sent to join the melancholy crew. When a new spirit in that world was found, 1,000 shadowy forms came flitting round. Those who had known him, fond inquiries made, "Of all we left, inform us, gentle shade, Now as we lead thee in our realms to dwell, Our twilight groves and meads of asphodel." What paints the poet is our station here, Where we like ghosts and flitting shades appear. This is the hell he sings, and here we meet, And former deeds to new-made friends repeat. Heroic deeds, which here obtain us fame, And are in fact the causes why we came. Yes, this dim region is old Homer's hell, Abate but groves and meads of asphodel. Here, when a stranger from your world we spy, We gather round him, and for news apply. He hears unheeding, nor can speech endure, But shivering gazes on the vast obscure. We smiling pity, and by kindness show We felt his feelings, and his terrors know. Then speak of comfort, time will give him sight, Where now 'tis dark, where now 'tis woe, delight. Have hope, we say, and soon the place to thee Shall not a prison, but a castle be. When to the wretch whom care and guilt confound, The world's a prison with a wider bound. Go where he may, he feels himself confined, And wears the fetters of an abject mind. But now adieu, those giant keys appear, Thou art not worthy to be inmate here. Go to thy world, and to the young declare What we, our spirits and employments, are. Tell them how we the ills of life endure, Our empire stable, and our state secure. Our dress, our diet, for their use describe, And bid them haste to join the generous tribe. Go to thy world, and leave us here to dwell, Who to its joys and comforts bid farewell. Farewell to these, but other scenes I view, And other griefs and guilt of deeper hue; Where conscience gives to outward ills her pain, Gloom to the night, and pressure to the chain. Here separate cells awhile in misery keep Two doom'd to suffer; there they strive for sleep, By day indulged, in large space they range, Their bondage certain, but their bounds have change. One was a female, who had grievous ill Wrought in revenge, and she enjoyed it still. With death before her, and her fate in view, Unsated vengeance in her bosom grew. Sullen she was and threatening; in her eyes Glared the stern triumph that she dared to die. But first a being in the world must leave, 'Twas once reproach, 'twas now a short reprieve. She was a pauper bound, who early gave Her mind to vice, and doubly was a slave. Upbraided, beaten, held by rough control, Revenge sustained, inspired, and filled her soul. She fired a full stored barn, confessed the fact, And laugh'd at law, and justified the act. Our gentle vicar tried his powers in vain, She answer'd not, or answer'd with disdain. The approaching fate she heard without a sigh, And neither cared to live, nor fear'd to die. Not so he felt, who with her was to pay The forfeit life; with dread he view'd the day, And that short space which yet for him remained, Till with his limbs his faculties were chained. He paced his narrow bounds, some ease to find, But found it not, no comfort reach'd his mind. Each sense was palsied; when he tasted food, He sigh'd and said, "Enough, 'tis very good." Since his dread sentence, nothing seem'd to be As once it was; he, seeing, could not see, Nor hearing, hear aright. When first I came within his view, I fancied there was shame; I judged resentment; I mistook the air; These fainter passions live not with despair, Or but exist and die. Hope, fear, and love, Joy, doubt, and hate, may other spirits move, But touch not his, who every waking hour Has one fixed dread, and always feels its power. But will not mercy? No, she cannot plead For such an outrage; 'twas a cruel deed. He stopp'd a timid traveller; to his breast With oaths and curses was the danger press'd. No, he must suffer; pity we may find For one man's pangs, but must not wrong mankind. Still I behold him, every thought employ'd On one dire view, all others are destroy'd. This makes his features ghastly, gives the tone Of his few words resemblance to a groan. He takes his tasteless food, and when 'tis done, Counts up his meals, now lessen'd by that one; For expectation is on time intent, Whether he brings us joy or punishment. Yes, e'en in sleep the impressions all remain, He hears the sentence and he feels the chain. He sees the judge and jury, when he shakes, And loudly cries "Not guilty," and awakes. Then chilling tremblings o'er his body creep, Till worn out nature is compelled to sleep. Now comes the dream again; it shows each scene With each small circumstance that comes between; The call to suffering and the very deed, There crowds go with him, follow and precede. Some heartless shout, some pity, all condemn, While he in fancied envy looks at them. He seems the place for that sad act to see, And dreams the very thirst which then will be. A priest attends, it seems the one he knew in his best days, beneath whose care he grew. At this his terrors take a sudden flight, he sees his native village with delight. The house, the chamber, where he once arrayed His youthful person, where he knelt and prayed. Then too the comforts he enjoyed at home, the days of joy, the joys themselves are come, the hours of innocence, the timid look of his loved maid, when first her hand he took, and told his hope. Her trembling joy appears, her forced reserve, and his retreating fears. All now is present, 'tis a moment's gleam of former sunshine. Stay, delightful dream! Let him within his pleasant garden walk, give him her arm, of blessings let them talk. Yes, all are with him now, and all the while Life's early prospects and his Fanny's smile. Then come his sister and his village friend, and he will now the sweetest moments spend life has to yield. No, never will he find again on earth such pleasure in his mind. He goes through shrubby walks these friends among, love in their looks, and honour on the tongue. Nay, there's a charm beyond what nature shows, the bloom is softer and more sweetly glows. Pierced by no crime, and urged by no desire for more than true and honest hearts require. They feel the calm delight, and thus proceed through the green lane, then linger in the mead, stray o'er the heath in all its purple bloom, and pluck the blossom where the wild bees hum. Then through the broomy bound with ease they pass, and press the sandy sheepwalk's slender grass, where dwarfish flowers among the gorse are spread, and the lamb browses by the linnet's bed. Then cross the bounding brook they make their way, o'er its rough bridge, and there behold the bay. The ocean smiling to the fervid sun, the waves that faintly fall and slowly run, the ships at distance and the boats at hand, and now they walk upon the sea-side sand, counting the number and what kind they be, ships softly sinking in the sleepy sea. Now arm in arm, now parted, they behold the glittering waters on the shingles rolled. The timid girls, half dreading their design, dip the small foot in the retarded brine, and search for crimson weeds, which spreading flow, or lie like pictures on the sand below. With all those bright red pebbles that the sun through the small waves so softly shines upon, and those live lucid jellies which the eye delights to trace as they swim glittering by. Pearl shells and rubied starfish they admire, and will arrange above the parlour fire. Tokens of bliss! Oh, horrible! A wave roars at his rises, "Save me, Edward, save!" she cries. Alas, the watchman on his way calls, and lets in truth, terror, and the day. End of letter 23. Letter 24 of the Borough by George Crabbe. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Letter 24, Schools. Be it a weakness, it deserves some praise. We love the play place of our early days. The scene is touching, and the heart is stone that feels not at that sight, and feels at none. The wall on which we tried our graving skill, the very name we carved subsisting still, the bench on which we sat while deep employed, though mangled, hacked, and hewed, yet not destroyed. The little ones unbuttoned, glowing hot, playing our games, and on the very spot, as happy as we once to kneel and draw the chalky ring, and knuckle down at taw. This fond detachment to the well-known place, when first we started into life's long race, maintains its hold with such unfailing sway, we feel it e'en in age and at our latest day. Cooper. Tu quoque ne metues camqui schola febere multo, increpit et truculenta senex gerat ora magister, de generis animos timor arguit, et tibi consta, intrepidas, nec te clamor placasque sonantes, nec matutinis agitet formido sub ores, quod sceptrum fibrat ferule, quod multa supellex virgie quod mollis guticam praetextit aluta, quod fervent trepido sub celia vestra tumultu, pompalosi et vane fugiatur sine timoris. Ausonius. Footnote 15. Our concluding subject is education, and some attempt is made to describe its various seminaries, from that of the poor widow who pronounces the alphabet for infants, to seats whence the light of learning is shed abroad in the world. If in this letter I describe the lives of literary men as embittered by much evil, if they be often disappointed and sometimes unfitted for the world they improve, let it be considered that they are described as men who possess that great pleasure, the exercise of their own talents, and the delight which flows from their own exertions. They have joy in their pursuits, and glory in their acquirements of knowledge. Their victory over difficulties affords the most rational cause of triumph, and the attainment of new ideas leads to incalculable riches, such as gratify the glorious avarice of aspiring and comprehensive minds. Here, then, I place the reward of learning. Our universities produce men of the first scholastic attainments, who are heirs to large possessions, or descendants from noble families. Now, to those so favoured, talents and acquirements are unquestionably means of arriving at the most elevated and important situations. But these must be the lot of a few. In general, the diligence, acuteness, and perseverance of a youth at the university have no other reward than some college honours and emoluments, which they desire to exchange, many of them, for very moderate incomes in the obscurity of some distant village. So that, in stating the reward of an ardent and powerful mind, to consist principally, I might have said entirely, in its own views, efforts, and excursions, I place it upon a sure foundation, though not one so elevated as the more ambitious aspire to. It is surely some encouragement to a studious man to reflect that, if he be disappointed, he cannot be without gratification, and that if he gets but a very humble portion of what the world can give, he has a continual fruition of unwearying enjoyment, of which it has not power to deprive him. Schools of every kind to be found in the Borough. The school for infants, the school preparatory, the sagacity of the mistress in foreseeing character, day schools of the lower kind, a master with talents adapted to such pupils, one of superior qualifications, boarding schools, that for young ladies, one going first to the governess, one finally returning home, school for youth, master and teacher, various dispositions and capacities, the miser boy, the bully boy, sons of farmers, how amused, what study will effect, examined, a college life, one sent from his college to a benefice, one retained there in dignity, the advantage in either case not considerable. Where then the good of a literary life? Answered, conclusion. To every class we have a school assigned, rules for all ranks, and food for every mind. Yet there is that small regard to rule or study pays, and still is deemed a school. That, where a deaf, poor, patient widow sits, and awes some 30 infants as she knits; infants of humble, busy wives, who pay some trifling price for freedom through the day. At this good matron's hut the children meet, who thus becomes the mother of the street. Her room is small, they cannot widely stray, her threshold high, they cannot run away. Though deaf, she sees the rebel hero shout; though lame, her white rod nimbly walks about. With band of yarn she keeps offenders in, And to her gown the sturdiest rogue can pin. Aided by these, and spells, and tell-tale birds, Her power they dread, and reverence her words. To learning's second seats we now proceed, Where humming students gilded primers read, Or books with letters large and pictures gay, To make their reading but a kind of play. Reading made easy, so the titles tell, But they who read must first begin to spell. There may be profit in these arts, but still Learning is labour, call it what you will. Upon the youthful mind a heavy load, Nor must we hope to find the royal road. Some will their easy steps to science show, And some to heaven itself their byway know. Ah, trust them not! Who fame or bliss would share, Must learn by labour, and must live by care. Another matron, of superior kind, For higher schools prepares the rising mind. Preparatory she her learning calls, The step first made to colleges and halls. She early sees to what the mind will grow, Nor abler judge of infant powers I know. She sees what soon the lively will impede, And how the steadier will in turn succeed. Observes the dawn of wisdom, fancy, taste, And knows what parts will wear, and what will waste. She marks the mind too lively, and at once Sees the gay coxcomb and the rattling dunce. Long has she lived, and much she loves to trace Her former pupils, now a lordly race; Whom when she sees rich robes and furs bedeck, She marks the pride which once she strove to check. A burgess comes, and she remembers well How hard her task to make his worship spell. Cold, selfish, dull, inanimate, unkind, 'Twas but by anger he displayed a mind. Now civil, smiling, complacent, and gay, The world has worn the unsocial crust away. That sullen spirit now a softness wears, And, save by fits, e'en dulness disappears. But still the matron can the man behold, Dull, selfish, hard, inanimate, and cold. A merchant passes, probity and truth, Prudence and patience marked thee from thy youth. Thus she observes, but oft retains her fears For him who now with name unstained appears; Nor hope relinquishes for one who yet Is lost in error and involved in debt. For latent evil in that heart she found, More open here, but here the core was sound. Various our day schools; here behold we one Empty and still, the morning duties done, Soiled, tattered, worn, and thrown in various heaps Appear their books, and there confusion sleeps. The workmen all are from the Babel fled, And lost their tools, till the return they dread. Meantime the master with his wig awry, Prepares his books for business by and by. Now all the insignia of the monarch laid Beside him rest, and none stand by afraid. He, while his troop light-hearted leap and play, Is all intent on duties of the day. No more the tyrant stern, or judge severe, He feels the father's and the husband's fear. Ah, little think the timid trembling crowd, That one so wise, so powerful, and so proud, Should feel himself, and dread the humble ills Of rent day charges and of coalmen's bills; That while they mercy from their judge implore, He fears himself a knocking at the door, And feels the burden as his neighbour states His humble portion to the parish rates. They sit the allotted hours, then eager run, Rushing to pleasure when the duty's done. His hour of pleasure is of different kind, Then cares domestic rush upon his mind, And half the ease and comfort he enjoys Is when surrounded by slates, books, and boys. Poor Reuben Dixon has the noisiest school Of ragged lads who ever bowed to rule. Low in his price, the men who heave our coals and clean our causeways send him boys in shoals. To see poor Reuben with his fry beside, their half-checked rudeness and his half-scorned pride, their room the sty in which the assembly meet, in the close lane behind the Northgate street, to observe his vain attempts to keep the peace, till tolls the bell and strife and trouble cease, calls for our praise. His labour praise deserves, but not our pity. Reuben has no nerves. Mid noise and dirt and stench and play and prate, he calmly cuts the pen or views the slate. But Leonard, yes, for Leonard's fate I grieve, who loathes the station which he dares not leave. He cannot dig, he will not beg his bread, all his dependence rests upon his head. And deeply skilled in sciences and arts, on vulgar lads he wastes superior parts. Alas! what grief that feeling mind sustains in guiding hands and stirring torpid brains. He whose proud mind from pole to pole will move, and view the wonders of the worlds above. Who thinks and reasons strongly, hard his fate, confined for ever to the pen and slate. True, he submits, and when the long dull day has slowly passed in weary tasks away, to other worlds with cheerful view he looks, and parts the night between repose and books. Amid his labours he has sometimes tried to turn a little from his cares aside. Pope, Milton, Dryden, with delight has seized, his soul engaged, and of his trouble eased. When, with a heavy eye and ill-done sum, no part conceived, a stupid boy will come. Then Leonard first subdues the rising frown, and bids the blockhead lay his blunders down; o'er which, disgusted, he will turn his eye, to his sad duty his sound mind apply, and vexed in spirit throw his pleasures by. Turn we to schools which more than these afford, the sound instruction and the wholesome board. And first our school for ladies, pity calls for one soft sigh, when we behold these walls, placed near the town, and where, from window high, the fair confined may our free crowds espy, with many a stranger gazing up and down, and all the envied tumult of the town. May, in the smiling summer eve, when they are sent to sleep, the pleasant hours away, behold the poor, whom they conceive the blest, employed for hours, and grieved they cannot rest. Hear the fond girl, whose days are sad and few, since dear mamma pronounced the last adieu. Looks to the road, and fondly thinks she hears the carriage wheels, and struggles with her tears. All yet is new, the misses great and small, Madam herself, and teachers odious all. From laughter, pity, nay command, she turns, but melts in softness, or with anger burns. Nauseates her food, and wonders who can sleep on such mean beds, where she can only weep. She scorns condolence, but to all she hates, slowly at length her mind accommodates. Then looks on bondage with the same concern as others felt, and finds that she must learn, as others learned, the common lot to share, to search for comfort and submit to care. There are, 'tis said, who on these seats attend, and to these ductile minds destruction vend. Wretches! to virtue, peace, and nature foes, to these soft minds their wicked trash expose, seize on the soul ere passions take the sway, and lead the heart ere yet it feels astray. Smugglers obscene, and can there be who take infernal pains the sleeping vice to wake? Can there be those by whom the thought defiled enters the spotless bosom of a child? By whom the ill is to the heart conveyed, who lend the foe, not yet in arms, their aid, and sap the city walls before the siege be laid? Oh, rather skulking in the byways steal, And rob the poorest traveller of his meal, Burst through the humblest trader's bolted door, Bear from the widow's hut her winter store, With stolen steed on highways take your stand, Your lips with curses armed, with death your hand. Take all but life; the virtuous more would say, Take life itself, dear as it is, away, Rather than guilty thus the guileless soul betray. Years pass away, let us suppose them past, The accomplished nymph for freedom looks at last. All hardships over which a school contains, The spirit's bondage and the body's pains; Where teachers make the heartless trembling set Of pupils suffer for their own regret; Where winter's cold, attacked by one poor fire, Chills the fair child commanded to retire. She felt it keenly in the morning air, Keenly she felt it at the evening prayer. More pleasant summer, but then walks were made, Not a sweet ramble, but a slow parade. They moved by pairs beside the hawthorn hedge, Only to set their feelings on an edge. And now at eve, when all their spirits rise, Are sent to rest, and all their pleasure dies; Where yet they all the town alert can see, And distant ploughboys pacing o'er the lea. These, and the tasks successive masters brought, The French they conned, the curious works they wrought, The hours they made their taper fingers strike Note after note, all dull to them alike; Their drawings, dancings on appointed days, Playing with globes, and getting parts of plays, The tender friendships made 'twixt heart and heart, When the dear friends had nothing to impart. All are over; now the accomplished maid Longs for the world, of nothing there afraid; Dreams of delight invade her gentle breast, And fancied lovers rob the heart of rest. At the paternal door a carriage stands, Love knits their hearts, and Hymen joins their hands. Ah, world unknown, how charming is thy view, Thy pleasures many, and each pleasure new! Ah, world experienced, what of thee is told? How few thy pleasures, and those few how old! Within a silent street, and far apart From noise of business, from a quay or mart, Stands an old spacious building, and the din You hear without explains the work within. Unlike the whisperings of the nymphs, this noise Loudly proclaims a boarding school for boys. The master heeds it not, for 30 years Have rendered all familiar to his ears. He sits in comfort mid the various sound Of mingled tones for ever flowing round. Day after day he to his task attends, Unvaried toil, and care that never ends. Boys in their works proceed, while his employ Admits no change, or changes but the boy. Yet time has made it easy; he beside Has power supreme, and power is sweet to pride. But grant him pleasure; what can teachers feel, Dependent helpers always at the wheel? Their power despised, their compensation small, Their labour dull, their life laborious all. Set after set the lower lads to make Fit for the class which their superiors take; The road of learning for a time to track In roughest state, and then again go back; Just the same way on other troops to wait, Attendance fixed at learning's lower gate. The day tasks now are over; to their ground Rush the gay crowd with joy compelling sound. Glad to elude the burdens of the day, The eager parties hurry to their play. Then in these hours of liberty we find The native bias of the opening mind. They yet possess not skill the mask to place, And hide the passions glowing in the face. Yet some are found, the close, the sly, the mean, Who know already all must not be seen. Lo, one who walks apart, although so young, he lays restraint upon his eye and tongue, nor will he into scrapes or dangers get, and half the school are in the stripling's debt. Suspicious, timid, he is much afraid of trick and plot, he dreads to be betrayed. He shuns all friendship, for he finds they lend when lads begin to call each other friend. Yet self with self has war. The tempting sight of fruit on sale provokes his appetite. See how he walks the sweet seduction by, that he is tempted, costs him first a sigh. 'Tis dangerous to indulge, 'tis grievous to deny. This he will choose, and whispering asks the price, the purchase dreadful, but the portion nice. Within the pocket he explores the pence, without, temptation strikes on either sense, the sight, the smell. But then he thinks again of money gone, while fruit nor taste remain. Meantime there comes an eager thoughtless boy, who gives the price and only feels the joy. Example dire, the youthful miser stops, and slowly back the treasured coinage drops. Heroic deed, for should he now comply, can he to-morrow's appetite deny? Beside, these spendthrifts who so freely live, cloyed with their purchase, will a portion give. Here ends debate, he buttons up his store, and feels the comfort that it burns no more. Unlike to him the tyrant boy, whose sway all hearts acknowledge, him the crowds obey. At his command they break through every rule, whoever governs, he controls the school. 'Tis not the distant emperor moves their fear, but the proud viceroy who is ever near. Verres could do that mischief in a day, for which not Rome, in all its power, could pay. And these boy tyrants will their slaves distress, and do the wrongs no master can redress. The mind they load with fear, it feels disdain for its own baseness, yet it tries in vain to shake the admitted power. The coward comes again. 'Tis more than present pain these tyrants give, long as we've life, some strong impressions live, and these young ruffians in the soul will sow seeds of all vices that on weakness grow. Hark! at his word the trembling younglings flee, where he is walking, none must walk but he. See, from the winter fire the weak retreat, his the warm corner, his the favourite seat, save when he yields it to some slave to keep a while, then back at his return to creep. At his command his poor dependants fly, and humbly bribe him as a proud ally. Flattered by all, the notice he bestows is gross abuse, and bantering, and blows. Yet he's a dunce, and spite of all his fame, without the desk, within he feels his shame. For there the weaker boy, who felt his scorn, for him corrects the blunders of the morn. And he is taught, unpleasant truth, to find the trembling body has the prouder mind. Hark! to that shout, that burst of empty noise, from a rude set of bluff obstreperous boys; they, who like colts let loose, with vigour bound, and thoughtless spirit o'er the beaten ground. Fearless they leap, and every youngster feels his Alma active in his hands and heels. These are the sons of farmers, and they come with partial fondness for the joys of home. Their minds are coursing in their father's fields, and e'en the dream a lively pleasure yields. They, much enduring, sit the allotted hours, and o'er a grammar waste their sprightly powers. They dance, but them can measured steps delight, whom horse and hounds to daring deeds excite? Nor could they bear to wait from meal to meal, did they not slyly to the chamber steal, and there the produce of the basket seize, the mother's gift, still studious of their ease. Poor Alma, thus oppressed, forbears to rise, but rests or revels in the arms and thighs. But is it sure that study will repay the more attentive and forbearing? Nay. The farm, the ship, the humble shop, have each gains which severest studies seldom reach. At college place a youth who means to raise His state by merit, and his name by praise. Still much he hazards. There is serious strife in the contentions of a scholar's life. Not all the mind's attention, care, distress, nor diligence itself, ensure success. His jealous heart a rival's powers may dread, till its strong feelings have confused his head, and after days and months, nay, years of pain, he finds just lost the object he would gain. But grant him this, and all such life can give, for other prospects he begins to live; begins to feel that man was formed to look and long for other objects than a book. In his mind's eye, his house and glebe he sees, and farms and talks with farmers at his ease. And time is lost, till fortune sends him forth To a rude world unconscious of his worth. There in some petty parish to reside, The college boast, then turned the village guide; And though awhile his flock and dairy please, He soon reverts to former joys and ease, Glad when a friend shall come to break his rest, And speak of all the pleasures they possessed, Of masters, fellows, tutors, all with whom They shared those pleasures, never more to come, Till both conceive the times by bliss endeared, Which once so dismal and so dull appeared. But fix our scholar, and suppose him crowned With all the glory gained on classic ground. Suppose the world without a sigh resigned, And to his college all his care confined. Give him all honours that such states allow, The freshman's terror and the tradesman's bow. Let his apartments with his taste agree, And all his views be those he loves to see. Let him each day behold the savoury treat, For which he pays not, but is paid to eat. These joys and glories soon delight no more, Although withheld, the mind is vexed and sore. The honour too is to the place confined, Abroad they know not each superior mind. Strangers no wranglers in these figures see, Nor give they worship to a high degree. Unlike the prophet's is the scholar's case, His honour all is in his dwelling place. And there such honours are familiar things. What is a monarch in a crowd of kings? Like other sovereigns he's by forms addressed, By statutes governed, and with rules oppressed. When all these forms and duties die away, And the day passes like the former day, Then of exterior things at once bereft, He's to himself and one attendant left. Nay, John too goes, nor aught of service more Remains for him; he gladly quits the door, And as he whistles to the college gate, He kindly pities his poor master's fate. Books cannot always please, however good, Minds are not ever craving for their food; But sleep will soon the weary soul prepare For cares to morrow that were this day's care. For forms, for feasts that sundry times have passed, And formal feasts that will for ever last. But then from study will no comforts rise? Yes, such as studious minds alone can prize. Comforts, yea, joys ineffable they find, Who seek the prouder pleasures of the mind. The soul collected in those happy hours, Then makes her efforts, then enjoys her powers, And in those seasons feels herself repaid For labours past and honours long delayed. No, 'tis not worldly gain, although by chance The sons of learning may to wealth advance; Nor station high, though in some favouring hour The sons of learning may arrive at power; Nor is it glory, though the public voice Of honest praise will make the heart rejoice; But 'tis the mind's own feelings give the joy, Pleasures she gathers in her own employ, Pleasures that gain or praise cannot bestow, Yet can dilate and raise them when they flow. For this the poet looks thy world around, Where form and life and reasoning man are found; He loves the mind, in all its modes to trace, And all the manners of the changing race. Silent he walks the road of life along, And views the aims of its tumultuous throng; He finds what shapes the Proteus passions take, And what strange waste of life and joy they make; And loves to show them in their varied ways, With honest blame, or with unflattering praise. 'Tis good to know, 'tis pleasant to impart These turns and movements of the human heart; The stronger features of the soul to paint, And make distinct the latent and the faint; Man as he is, to place in all men's view, Yet none with rancour, none with scorn pursue; Nor be it ever of my portraits told, Here the strong lines of malice we behold. This let me hope, that when in public view I bring my pictures, men may feel them true; This is a likeness, may they all declare, And I have seen him, but I know not where; For I should mourn the mischief I had done, If, as the likeness, all would fix on one. Man's vice and crime I combat as I can, But to his God and conscience leave the man. I search, a Quixote, all the land about, To find its giants and enchanters out; The giant Folly, the enchanter Vice, Whom doubtless I shall vanquish in a trice. But is there man whom I would injure? No, I am to him a fellow, not a foe; A fellow sinner, who must rather dread The bolt, than hurl it at another's head. No, let the guiltless, if there such be found, Launch forth the spear, and deal the deadly wound. How can I so the cause of virtue aid, Who am myself attainted and afraid? Yet as I can, I point the powers of rhyme, And, sparing criminals, attack the crime. End of Letter 24. End of the Borough, by George Crabbe.